Penny Carpenter. Penny is the Network Business Manager for the Carpenter Network, which provides information and communication technologies, telecommunication infrastructure, and application support in First Nations communities across a vast, remote region of northwestern Ontario, as well as other remote regions in Canada. Penny grew up in Sioux Valley, a small rural town in northwestern Ontario, and she is a member of the Lac Seul First Nation. Penny.
So this is our last presentation, so hopefully I'm lively enough. I know it's very tense presentation so far in discussion, so it's very interesting. So I'm hoping that the whole group here figures it all out and develops that policy and gets the government to put a strategy or policy in place. So yes, so the rural north can have broadband. But in the meantime, I don't know who knows what of the north, but we've just really been working hard at doing what we can. Thank you for my introduction. I thought I'd start, and my presentation is mostly about people. You know, the people are why we're here in the room today, and these are my kids here, and this is our well, in the south I guess it's cottage, but for us it's our camp. Across the lake is where my grandfather's trap line is, and then you can't see the cabin, but there's a little cabin in the back. And on this end we actually have a cottage where we have a running toilet and everything. So it's very so anyways, yeah, so we too like running water. So my presentation today is about women in technology. In the last couple of years I work for Carpenter Network, and we've been maintaining it and growing it for the last 15 years. And so we've done a survey on KNet users, and part of the people that contributed to the survey were women from First Nation communities. So I gathered that information. There was 231 of them, and wrote a paper. Not just me, a group of us. So Susan O'Donnell is one of the key leads, and I have 3 videos in my PowerPoint, and so she'll be talking about some of her experience in working with the First Nation communities. So this is just a description on the paper, and it was really to identify how First Nations women are using the broadband technology as it comes to their communities, how they're using it, what they're using it for, and so we kind of explored that and asked a few questions. So my presentation is divided up into 3 groups, or 3 areas. So first I'm just going to describe the First Nations in Northern Ontario, then talk a bit about the paper and the women in technology, and then summarize some of the recommendations and conclusions. So this is a picture. So this one here, this is actually Slate Falls First Nation from the Skies, which is a small community. And this was actually taken just a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, we're already getting ice on our lakes. So. And this is Michigobami here, nice little church. So in Northern Ontario, as you all know, kind of starts over here in Parry Sound, but it's actually, when I talk Northern Ontario, it's really this area here where there's remote and rural First Nations. And there's about 25 of them that we work with, and we actually call it the Silicout area. Back in the day when INAC had a big office in Silicout, they used to provide all the services, and they had a big INAC office in Silicout and would serve that area. So that's kind of divided up by kind of a federal terminology. Because they're rural, there's definitely limited access to health, education, and just business opportunities. So basically, each community, I know you hear lots of news on the CBC or CTV or whatever about First Nations communities, but really, each community is its own nation. They have their own government, and they have chief and council, and they run their own infrastructure. And so they're sort of comparable to a municipality, but really they have their own autonomy and jurisdiction and all that. Each of those 25 communities, they're part of the Carpenter Network. This is the Carpenter Network. It started with 5 small communities and that were part of the KO Tribal Council, and we had a broadband project back in 2000, and then it quickly expanded to the rest of the communities in the north. Some of the communities we actually deliver C-band satellite service, and we do that with a joint venture with Northern Manitoba and Northern Quebec. So that's why these communities here are on the map, but it's a broadband managed system out of Silicote, and we bring all the connections to 151 in Toronto and connect different telcos. We also serve several other communities in Ontario, about 60 First Nation communities across Ontario, and there's about 120 endpoints. So there's a quick description. So in the 25 communities, since 2000, we've been using C-band satellite to bring broadband to the communities and T1 circuits, Bell circuits. In the last couple of years, Bell has really, they could not build on the T1 technology anymore, and all their equipment became end of life, so they approached our network to start planning to develop the fiber to the community. So then we ended up asking Anishinaabe Aski Nation to lead the project. So NAN, which is called NAN, they have a project called the Northern Ontario Broadband, so it's to build fiber to 25 communities in the north. I guess all the other projects that were described today, there's definitely some challenges, and there's going to be, it's divided up into different projects, and the last 5 communities, which are sort of in that area called the Ring of Fire, which has been on the news, they're kind of not going to be developed for a couple of years until more funding comes available. But the good news is these communities here, Slave Falls and Cat Lake, actually just got connected in the last 2 weeks. So they were both satellite served communities, and maybe got 2 to 4 megs of bandwidth, but now they both have 100 meg pops. So this is there's Cat Lake and Slave Falls right there. So we had the opportunity to send our multimedia people to Slave Falls when they connected the pump, so we did do a quick little video.
On November 20th, 2012, Multimedia Coordinator Cal Kenny from the Keewatinokokomokonic Tribal Council, or KO, and KO research partner Susan O'Donnell from the First Nations Innovation Project and the University of New Brunswick flew to Slate Falls First Nation to talk with community leaders about their new fiber connection. The Northwestern Ontario Broadband Expansion Initiative to construct a Bell-aligned fiber network is supporting 26 First Nation communities to upgrade their connectivity infrastructure with a fiber optic cable connection.
We actually had internet services long before we had any phone. We were still using the Bell calendar phone, but we had internet. Sounds crazy that you don't have the internet before phones was. We tell people, give us our email address, but what's your phone number? We only have one phone. So it was kind of funny in a way.
Several of these First Nations, including Slate Falls, are members of the Northern Indigenous Community Satellite Network, managed by Keewatinokokomokonic. Switching from fiber allows broadband connectivity speeds up to 50 times faster than satellite. Slate Falls First Nation, a remote Oji Cree community, is the first community in this construction project to switch from satellite to fiber. The Slate Falls Chief and Band Council are all women, as are many of the community members who lead and manage the community services using the local broadband services. As part of the KOE community work, KO KNET is working with Slate Falls First Nation to support their local network. All of the local equipment and services, including the internet, video conferencing, IP phones, telemedicine, and other services, are owned, controlled, and accessed by the Slate Falls community.
We do a lot of get frontline workers involved with some of the activities that and events that get through telehealth. And like there's some that really catches an interest to the community.
These community leaders made their decision to continue supporting the local services, including the local IP phone service on their cable network, instead of allowing Bell Alliant to offer their phone service throughout the community.
Whatever money comes in, it stays in the reserve. Because instead of having it going out, we use that money to buy our equipment, or much needed equipment, I should say sometimes. Or say if our server goes down, just buy one out of that program. Yeah, pretty much it stays in the reserve.
Computer use for administration, I'm working with the Data Van Student Information System regularly. Report cards, it's kind of nice doing it through that system because I know in the past I've had to write everything by hand. And it's actually a very easy tool to use for recording attendance. Helps me out immensely with my month-end reports as long as we have the accuracy, which we have gotten up to date now. Makes things a lot easier.
Cal and Susan also met with other staff members from KO, with the Ontario Ministry of Economic Development and Innovation, and with technicians from Bell Alliant who are completing their fiber connections between their new central office in Slate Falls and the Slate Falls Telco building. The switch to the new fiber connection went well, and now the community members are enjoying increased internet speeds and more reliable connectivity. Bell Alliant is receiving more than $60 million from different government partners to complete this fiber construction project with the 26 First Nations. Slate Falls First Nation and KOKNet now need to find the thousands of dollars in funding required to complete the fiber connections to the local health center, the administration building, and the school, using the fiber that is presently left hanging on the poles in the community. The fiber will support Slate Falls First Nation to use broadband strategically for future community and economic development.
So I just took these the day after I took these graphs off our network, and it just shows like here before the connection and then the spike up. So basically the people, we have a worker from Slate Falls in our office, and she was saying people were just sending messages online and on Facebook, and they could do YouTube and all that. And you know, I think those are just fun activities people in the homes like to do, and the gaming and all that. But there's definitely a demand for the bandwidth. But we also deliver telemedicine, we connect the internet high school. The Data Van system is actually an education system that we host in our data center at the network at the head office in Silicon. So there's different applications that, as we develop the KNET network, we also develop different applications because it's really important. You can't just bring the POP to the community. You really have to have that other end where people are using it, and it's a useful tool to build a healthier community and not just
Who connected the POP to the local hospital or local municipal office?
So no one yet, so that's what Susan did refer to that. So basically, under the project itself, that was its limitation, that the Bell was just to bring the connection to. So there's in each community there will be a Bell CO building, and I guess a Telco CO building, and then there's a community POP. So under the project, it was to build the connection to the POP, and then a fiber connection to the health center, because Health Canada committed some money to it. And then there's ends to build the rest of the fiber to the band office and to the school, but it wasn't part of the project, so there's still a lot more money to kind of figure out where it's going to come from to build the rest of it.
And who's going to build it once you get the money?
So that's a good question. Yeah, all that has who's going to build it once we get the money. So basically, what we've done is trained a few people in fiber, like we brought a fiber guy in, because we deliver telemedicine to the health center. I say we as the KNET is part of Carpenter, which is a larger service organization, and we also deliver telemedicine So because we have fiber to the health center, basically the project built the fiber to the outside of the building, but now we have to bring it in to connect fiber to the router inside the building so we can access the better connection. So all that still has to be figured out. But that's the limitation of the project. So. And then I just wanted to show you this, if some of you aren't aware of it, it's just this First Mile website. It's really a website where a group of researchers are documenting building First Mile to the communities instead of calling it the last mile. That if you plan the first mile first, then all the other stuff will be worked out. So section 2, we're just going to go through the paper itself and some of the themes and interesting facts. So basically, from what I gathered today, all the presenters talked about how we needed data. So again, there's really a lack of data and how users are using broadband today. And so this is just sort of our kick at the can, getting information on the different users that are using the KNet network. So we had different questions that we asked people, how they're using it in their daily lives, their approach. Do they use it for cultural preservation? Do they use it for health services? And what do they need to support better use? So, and I guess I just want to point out, like, there is a bigger group called the VideoCom group that has been studying First Nations and technology for the last several years. So I already discussed some of the challenges, of course, with this study, I guess to point out, is it was really an online survey. So just the survey went to people with KNet addresses. And so it wasn't a ramble sample. And it was, so I guess we can't generalize on all First Nations in Ontario. So I guess when I first decided that I wanted to write something on women in technology in remote communities, it was really to kind of see the connection between women and their role as mothers and how they incorporate the use of ICT and to become mothers with ICT. So I wanted to see how did they use technology to supervise their children or to connect to other their family members across the different communities. So again, there was 231 women that we did that report that emailed in their survey. And then the women had different roles. There were mothers, elders, educators, students, health service providers, leaders or counselors. So generally, everyone had an email address, obviously, because they had a KNet email address. So that was an easy question, I guess. Yeah. So basically, and then they had good their qualitative comments were good. Like they did see the importance of using it for education, healthcare, family, culture, and entertainment. They were able to share and send email and keep track of everybody. But they also were able to comment that if you just had a T1 or 2 T1s or a C-band, you don't really have a lot of bandwidth to do a lot of online classes or download pictures or anything like that. So that, they did tell us that. They're frustrated with the internet. So yeah, so women definitely use it a lot for social networking. So when we started the network 15 years ago, we actually started what was called the homepage. So it was just sort of like Facebook is today, but a bit simpler. It's just people were able to post who they were, where they're from, and keep people updated on what they were doing. So a lot of, right away they were always doing a lot of social networking and emailing each other. So that still happens today. definitely most of the communities, instead of home pages, use Facebook. So basically, just as I was saying, you know, First Nations women have embraced technology. They're able to use it to learn how to use the skills. They plan for it. They supervise their children using it. They sit on different education or health boards and plan for the schools or the health centers to have it. So this is a picture of Darlene Panajus. She's in the community from Michigan. She is what we call the telemedicine coordinator in her community. So she's in a community that delivers telemedicine in partnership with Ontario Telemedicine Network. So she uses it in every day. She also uses it, encourages other people in her community to use it. And she also used it herself to do prenatal courses. And she, in her community, there was an emergency birth, and she actually used telemedicine to assist in delivery of the first telebaby. And now we have we've delivered 14. So for most of the rural communities, what happens is if you're going to deliver, you have to leave your community for 2 to 4 weeks before delivery and live in Silicon or Winnipeg or Thunder Bay. So in some cases, if there's emergency birth, then you need direction from, there's no doctors in the communities. They have like on-call doctors, so you phone them up. So now that we have telemedicine in communities, they're actually able to use telemedicine and guide the nurses that are in the communities to deliver. So bring it actually, and in a way, it's a good thing because it's there for emergency, but it's a good thing because it brings the birth of children back to the community. So this is just who are the women communicating online. You know, it's just really people in their community mostly, and in the region. So this Chief Connie Gray is from Michigan, and this is a quick little video done by a youth in her community, and actually I think it's her daughter. And so at KNET, what we've really done over the years is try to find different pots of money to really push capacity building, and there might be a term youth program for 6 weeks or computer technology training for 15 weeks, but at least we're getting the skills in the community. So this is a youth that developed a video from that.
My name is Connie Gray McKay. I'm the chief for Michigan, and I've been the chief for 7 years and a councillor for 10 years before that. The main goal would be to protect the treaty rights of our people, First Nations people. Letters from community members, from the government, many phone calls about housing, just different issues in the community. Pretty much act as a first response to anything coming into the reserve and anything that needs to be directed towards the council members. And the first line of communication, I guess, towards the community and represent the community in the best way possible that I can. Ways through the telephone, email. Sometimes we do communications by using the TV, video conferencing. But those are the three most common ways that we use technology in the workplace. Of course, our finance, they use technology through using the bank. They have banking. Internet has really given us a lot of good things because now we can communicate. You can send communications to a lot of different people all at once. You keep files, less paper in the office. I do really basic computer skills, and it's really helped me. I think the biggest way that technology helps is that if I get an email from someone, I can share that email with all council members of the council. I can share it no matter where they are. They could be in different locations. So I can also protect sensitive information. Plus our webpage is another way we communicate information to the community members. Yeah, I think technology is important to have because in a community anything critical can happen, so it's the sharing of information without, like I said, not being in the same location. You can share information amongst a whole bunch of stakeholders, whether it be your staff, your frontline workers, your community members, keep people informed of what's going on. We're gonna have radio technology soon, so I can be able to do radio broadcasts. Because that's one thing I haven't done very well yet is do verbal communications through radio technology. So now, because our community is so widespread, we have a radio jump at the band office site where the main site is on the main reserve. So that's another way we'll be able to do that. So with that high-speed services will be easier. People will have be able to access satellite phone system. So because we have people living everywhere on the land, they'll be able to have telecommunications like cell phones out in the bush. So if something happens out there, they can call in for ambulance or police or whatever they need if somebody gets hurt.
So I just wanted to mention it in Michigan, they're along the highway to Pickle Lake. I don't know how many people know Northern Ontario, but it kind of goes to, they're sort of the outer edge of the NAN broadband fiber build, but fiber had to go along the Pickle Lake Highway up past Mish and to Pickle Lake and in the north. But their part of the fiber build was part of a different project under Bell. So even though they're part of the group of First Nations that are sort of served by the NAN project build, and their money came from a different pot of money, the connection to the health center wasn't paid for. They had to pay for an additional sum of money to get their health center just because of definitions and the funding comes from a different pot of funding. So those are different challenges that I guess everyone probably has to meet, and you kind of have to figure out where you fit in to get things done. But that's the way the world is, to just figure it out and get it done and get the service to the communities. So we did ask a few questions about ICT and health and wellness, and just generally, do you use telemedicine? Because we've been delivering telemedicine for about 10 years now, and then it looks like about half the community says yes, but a lot of them says, I don't know, and I don't know if that's because it's been there so long as a service that, you know, there's users and there's some, it's a young population, so maybe that population is just in their 20s now and haven't had a need to use it. So it's really all those variables that, you know, you kind of try to figure it out. But when we read that as a service deliverer of telemedicine, we think, well, if there's so many I don't knows, how do we educate them to know that the service is available? So those are our challenges. And then, yeah, so another half of them say, yes, it should be a useful service for me. And it should be increased in our community. So yeah, so we're looking forward to more to delivering telemedicine. And I think generally telemedicine and doctors, the more and more that it'll become part of their practice that they have to use telemedicine. So you know, we have to make sure that service is available in our rural communities. So these are just some pictures of telemedicine activity currently. So these are in different health centers in northern communities. This one here is the interesting one because it's we've been working on telehome care. It's a kind of a difficult area. There's really no funding in it, but we've been piloting some equipment. This is a little camera here, and she's going to have a visit with a tele-rehab person and probably maybe the Thunder Bay Regional Hospital. So the elderly lady doesn't have to leave her home, or maybe she can't leave her home, but we're bringing the service to the home. And I think more and more rural areas want that for their elderly people, so they can have their appointments and not leave home. In the area we're from, there's hardly any beds in long-term care facilities. And if you do get a bed, the people from the north, like Fort Severn, that are like on the Hudson Bay coast, have to live in Thunder Bay or Kenora, or, in areas where they don't have family. So it's important that we make sure that the elderly people can remain in their homes as long as possible, or get palliative care in their homes, and they can die in their communities, not in unknown places. And this is an example of women preserving culture. So as soon as we started doing video conferencing, we decided that we wanted to bring that. We thought one way to promote the use of video conferencing is really to engage elders, because they're the leaders in the community. So we started these elder conferences. So the elders would meet with other elders from different communities. And when we started, it was really great, because some elders didn't see their brothers or sisters or cousins that lived in other remote communities for years. So we brought them together. And it took a while for them to figure out how to use the equipment, and even today, sometimes they're hitting the mic or whatever. But yeah, so every December we actually have this big Christmas party, and each community they love singing, so they'll have singing in different communities. And yeah, there's some people that hog the mic too, so it's kind of fun to watch. And then there's another time where they have storytelling, and it's a competition, and so that's a really good hit too. But it's really part of building that healthy community and bringing the spirit back to the community. So yeah, I can't say much more. Like, language and culture is so important in First Nation. You really have to build that. You really have to. Who you are is so important in your life to be a better person. So supporting that even through ICT is important. So I talked a bit about tele-rehab. So the tele-rehab itself actually embedded these principles here. They're in the Anishinaabe grandfather teachings. And so over here is just an example of love and kindness, how they built it as a principle within their project, to respect the people they work with and to love them. So it's just our way of making sure that that we bring that culture into any services that we're delivering. And I think it's really just common sense, some of them. So love and protect and be honest. So we talked a lot, you've heard the chief and the other people in Slate Falls talk about the use of technology. And a lot of them are women. There's women counselors, women chiefs, band administrators, health directors, and they all look at how they could use telemedicine, or how they can use ICT to bring better service to their communities. All of our funding reporting is done online. All the tools, everything we use, and so it's really made, like anywhere else, made our service better. And here, this is actually a conference, and just a good example. Yeah, like people live in remote communities. It's very costly to travel out, so we have to bring people together by meetings. And this one it was during the H1N crisis. So we would set up different community meetings, and maybe 25 communities would meet to share health information. So women respond. I guess they don't do the iPod, no, the iPad or the iPhone craze. They don't line up at the Apple store. They plan, think about what they need to buy. Well, one, it's really because it's costly, so everyone, it's pretty low income. There's low jobs in the community, so you really have to plan how you're going to use your money wisely. Women definitely, they like to speak out and tell us if it's not working. We run a centralized service desk with the network, and so they know our 1-800 number and will tell us if something's down. So no one's too shy about that. So, and it really speaks to the demand for needing better bandwidth in the communities. So the first, I put this one up here. This is a comment. When we asked about culture, the one reply was, I don't use the ICT for my culture because that's important to go out in the land to, that's separate from ICT. So it's really important to really respect that person's opinion that, you can't really just push ICT or phone, take your cell phone or, you need to respect their space. So, I think women do influence broadband development in their communities. So this video is on the e-community model. So I'm not sure who's familiar with the e-community model, but really it's about bringing a POP to the community and sharing that POP with different services or developing a community ISP model, so it brings the jobs to the community. And so you're not just buying the POP from a telco and the money's going up. Sort of like what Wes was saying in the first video. The money stays in the community, you're able to use that money to buy the routers or the parts that you need to replace. So we've been, Susan O'Donnell is part of a larger e-community research project, and she spent a month in North Spirit Lake.
Across Canada, First Nation communities are developing their broadband infrastructure, their local networks, and community services using the broadband. First Nation community leaders, through their national organization, the Assembly of First Nations, have adopted the e-community framework based on concepts such as first mile instead of last mile. As an approach for broadband development, e-community is fueled by the desire of First Nations to own, control, and manage their local infrastructure and services. In northwestern Ontario, the Tribal Council Keewatin-Okokumekaanik, or KO, is developing a comprehensive e-community approach with its member First Nations. The KO e-community approach was shared and well received recently at the 2012 Annual General Assembly of the Assembly of First Nations. One of the KO communities is North Spirit Lake First Nation. It is remote and accessible by air. About 400 people live in North Spirit Lake. Their language and culture is Oji Cree. E-community idea has been around for a couple of years, but this is the first time that we've actually done work at a community level around that.
I just wanted to talk about the technology that we're in nowadays. When we first started, I first started with KNet back in, I forget what year that was, 90s? Anyways, I started with KNet when the bulletin board system was just black and white screen only.
Well, the research project that I'm working on, and the reason I'm here in North Spirit Lake, is looking at how communities are using technologies and how that can be done, how communities can do that more effectively.
I'd like to see, like, using the internet where we can actually help the people, the young people that are out here in the community.
Living in North Spirit, it's fun, it's exciting, just watching the reserve develop, especially with technology and everything.
In every community, more and more, they're using broadband technology and networks to support many, many activities in the communities, and that includes things like people in their homes using Facebook or YouTube or even using cell phones and things like that, to at the community level where the different service functions in the community are supported by broadband. Even functions like housing, housing coordinators, housing managers use technology as part of their work. If you look at the health function, telehealth is really important. It's important in education. So the e-community idea is that technology supports all these different activities in communities.
Because me personally with my work, we're going to be starting our training using video conferencing, training what we need in our job positions.
So the Tribal Council Kiiwetinokokomokanic has been really developing the e-community idea in the First Nations communities that it represents and works with. Because to support, which is our project that we're doing with KO, to support the communities to develop their technology, it has to work really well with each individual community because every community has a different way of operating. So we've tried a couple of things. The first thing we did was the e-community, North Spirit Lake e-community group on Facebook. We did a survey last year with KNET and we found out that most people in North Spirit Lake communicate using Facebook.
Having it on Facebook would be a really good advantage to have, so they could just click on and like, oh, what's happening here? Like, I got a notification, what is it? And they can actually see what's going on in their community instead of just, hearing about it later.
What the Facebook page is about is to raise awareness in the community. Because previously, when there were new technology developments in the community or upgrades or things happening, the information would tend to be just with a few people in the community. And what we're doing with the Facebook group is we want to get as many community members as possible on board so that when there's information to share and things happening with technology in the community, a lot more people can understand what's going on and learn about what's going on.
Yeah, nowadays I see that what we have, the technology now, it can cut down the cost of travel if the ones that want to use it will use it.
There's a number of upgrades happening in North Spirit Lake over the next year. Really exciting developments actually with the cell service. They're upgrading from 2G to 3G, which means people can use internet on the phone. And then the other really big thing that's happening is there's a fiber connection coming to the community, which means a lot more broadband, a lot more bandwidth coming into the community, which means more people can do more things with the technology. So to prepare for that, there were two technicians from KNET that came up and worked with Raylene Meekus and Kathleen Ray to prepare the different functions in the community to do that. So that involved upgrades at the cell tower, moving some of the cabling in the community to the new telco building to prepare for the fiber coming in.
We tried connecting a three-way tap to the school, but we couldn't get a signal from the modem. So now what we have to do is we have to go up and we have to run a separate line from that tap up there all the way across the street to the school for a separate line for the KIHS.
All right. And then various things around the community that needed repairing or upgrading, like wireless in the school, in the community hall, and a few things like that.
We moved a bunch of cables that run from the pole to the other pole, basically. And we had to extend 2 cords from the modem from the band office. And we had to get the cable up onto the wires, which was exhausting because they're so heavy.
The other thing is that, working with the 2 community members who've been chosen and who've agreed and who are going to be now leading the next phase of this work over the next while. And that's Raylene Meekus and Kathleen Ray, and the 2 of them will be working over the next year on the e-community project with KNET to develop some of these ideas and some of these plans. And the first thing that we've decided will happen is to develop the model and the business plan for making technology work in the community.
Basically now I know how much effort goes into getting the internet set up. I won't be complaining about that anymore.
So Slate Falls. So yeah, it's a really good job that Raylene really came on board and Kathleen to be trained as the technicians in the community. There's a couple of them across the north. There's not a whole lot of First Nation women, but it's really an area where they're starting to develop their skills because they know how important it is. But I don't think I would be climbing the poles anytime soon. So again, that's our map of our community. Basically, it's bringing that point of presence to the community and then just sharing it with different businesses, health centers, schools, and developing those areas. And it's really not just giving it to the community, but working with the community to plan how it should function, how it should be serviced, how it's going to be paid for, like putting all that on the table and working with the community one-on-one as a key partner to develop it. And those are pictures of North Spirit Lake. This far corner here, so this is, I think in the Slate Fall presentation she talked about the one telephone too. So in those both communities, Bell didn't have to really, Bell is sort of the monopoly in the north, and they at the time didn't have to serve those communities, I guess at the time, or maybe the or whatever. So they just had the one payphone outside the band office for years, and that's how people would phone. So if you can imagine how difficult it was to connect with your family in other places, or even if you're traveling out to go to Winnipeg or somewhere to make a reservation somewhere. And we would travel to these communities, and sometimes it's like 30 below, and we'd have to make a phone call to the office or phone the airline to see if they're going to be coming into the community that day. So things have come a long way. North Spirit Lake does have Bell telephone now, but in Slate Falls they did develop their own telephone system, and it's through the internet, voice over IP through the internet. And now that Bell has fiber to the community, Bell wanted to put their phone lines in, and they said, no, it's our business model, it supports our business, and we don't want your phones. So, sort of. I guess it would be any help. Yeah. So basically, like our recommendations from the whole study, and some of them are just generally from the work that we've done. It's really, there is no key policy of First Nations. They're under the jurisdiction of INAC or Aboriginal Affairs. They don't really have a connectivity or broadband policy. They might have a few broad guidelines right now, but no funding connected to those guidelines. So it's still a real challenge to see where funding will come to build that first mile. And the other really area that we like to focus and what we got from the study is really that continued building that capacity in the community. Because if there's that need in the community for that ICT and for those skills and to deliver those skills like telemedicine to the home, or the students in the school need to use their whiteboards or those types of things, we really need to have that capacity at the local level. We do, we have teachers that travel to communities and they're there from 1 to 5 years, and they go back to their home or back to other areas. And so we start again, so we really need that capacity in the community so it's there for the long term. So basically, conclusion, just what I've been saying, like women are engaged, all those 3 videos, each of those communities, they're all the chiefs are First Nation women, the health directors are First Nations women, band administrators, so they're in the key positions, so they're out there speaking for their communities.